Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the 10th episode of Season 2 of the Broker Breakdown. Mike, can you believe that we've gotten this far already?
Yeah, it's exciting. We've done more. When we start off in anything new, I think you don't really know what to expect right away and how you're going to kind of fill the time. But we've definitely had no problems doing that.
No, honestly, I cannot believe that we've already turned around and it's already March of 2023. Like, where is the time going this year?
I think we actually started our first episodes around maybe April of last year.
Yeah, I think we're basically going to be coming up in the next month on a year. We did take that big break during the summertime, so it's kind of hard to say like we've been doing this for a year. But
yeah,
like,
true.
Technically, we have.
No, that's that's super exciting. I think we've gotten past a lot of people that maybe haven't, like anyone starting off something new. If you don't see some traction too, you always think like, oh, is it worth doing? Or is it providing value to anybody I know out there? But I think personally, it's been now we've got past that kind of hurdle and that hump. Now it's something I enjoy doing every week. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yep. And actually, we just hit our 350th listen, I guess you would call it. So we want to thank you guys for always tuning in every week. And the next goal is definitely to be at 500, hopefully by the end of the month or going into April. Let's say going into April, we want to hit that kind of 500 listens. So again, thank you guys for listening, and we always appreciate the support that you guys offer us. But yeah, today is kind of a cool topic because I know everyone, including myself and Mike, are kind of sick and tired of the winter months and the snow and the cold. So kind of a little bit to lighten up our spirits a little bit. We are going to be talking about springtime and kind of how that pertains to both auto and home insurance. This episode is going to be more pertained towards like tips going into this more warmer weather that we're going to have. And again, the massive melt off we're going to have of snow, more rain coming obviously in the springtime. So I would say this is more going to be like a tip episode, more towards just kind of making sure that you're doing the right things kind of leading up into the spring and warmer weather. And just kind of kicking it off from there, Mike. So I think the first one we want to talk to about on the car side is summer and recreational vehicles.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people out there have vehicles with some of the classic car companies. The two that come to mind, I think, are Hagerty, and I think there's Silver Wheels. I might have had that name wrong, James. But I know there's a few. They're very specific, but these kind of antique classic car insurers that people that have more vintage vehicles have their insurance with for those. And this is the time of the year they're going to be bringing those back on the road or getting them on the road, regardless if they have them insured or not. Yeah.
Even some people, for example, like they'll have like that winter beater, I guess you would want to call it still. And then they have a nicer vehicle that they might put on in the summertime or springtime. But the biggest thing we want to kind of hone in on this point is making sure that when the warmer weather does come around, we want to make sure that you have the right coverage going into that springtime and the summertime. Because what a lot of clients do is during the winter, obviously they put the winter beater on, they have very minimal coverage just to kind of drive, and they don't really care what happens to that vehicle. But with the good vehicle that they have, they're waiting for spring or summer to come around, they usually do what we call parked coverages. So basically, there's still fire, theft, vandalism coverage on the vehicle, but there's actually no road coverages. And the biggest thing is that, for example, like a nice day like today, actually, I'm looking at my window and it's looking very nice out today. But you'll see a very nice day, warm weather, and you're like, you know what? I want to take my car out for a ride. But a lot of people forget that they don't have road coverages on their vehicle. So the biggest point we want to really hone in on right now is if you are going to be taking that summer or spring or antique vehicle or whatever it might be, please make sure that you're calling your insurance agent or your broker or whoever's dealing with your insurance and making sure that your car has road coverages on. Because the last thing you want to do is take that vehicle out on the road, something happen, and then find out, oh, you know what? I never called that road coverages back onto my vehicle.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right? It's happened before. I know a lot of people get super excited and they kind of just assume that if they have a policy in place that their vehicle is insured. I want to say that you should not take that mindset because lots of times people can just drive a vehicle and not necessarily know that maybe it just had fire and theft on it, for example.
Yeah, and like I said, it's getting into that warmer weather, and people are getting excited. Like for me and Mike, for example, like we're getting so pumped up for golf, and I always kind of forget, like, oh, we probably still have another like at least a month and a half before we can actually get on the courses. But I'm really trying to like really get out beforehand, right? So it's kind of the same with a car. Like it's sat in your garage all winter. You're like, like I really want to go drive that thing, but I don't want it to touch snow. I don't want it to touch salt. And then, like I said, you get that one few day span where it's really, really warm, and maybe before we got all this snow. But I remember a few weeks ago, Mike, we had that really good weather span where we had like no snow. It was like 13 degrees for like 3 days in a row. And I did see a lot of like nicer cars on the road. But again, you want to make sure that if you are going to be doing that, you need to make sure that you're remembering to, if you did remove that coverage back in the winter, because you're like, you know what, I'm not going to be driving this vehicle until springtime, just make sure you're doing your due diligence and adding that coverage back on before you actually put it on the road. There was
some other tips too, James, that you had for just general car stuff, was there not?
Yes. Again, moving into springtime, we want to make sure we are removing your winter tires. The weather is kind of getting a lot warmer now. Maybe not as of right now, as the time of recording, but again, moving into like late March, early April, with temperatures starting to rise a little bit, you want to make sure you are getting your winter tires removed, putting your all seasons or summer tires on, or whatever you want to call them. Again, just for better performance. Again, with winter tires, usually the rule of thumb is anything under 7 degrees or minus 7 degrees, you want to have them on. Anything above that, you want to obviously switch your tires out and have the summer or the all seasons on. So definitely making sure you're making your appointment, because again, a lot of mechanics shops are going to start really piling up. So you want to make sure you're kind of ahead of the game and not having to wait until like May to do that.
Yeah, and I think most insurance companies, the general rule, and I say that generally speaking, just because everyone has their own specific timelines or guidelines, most are, I think, at the end of March, James, as like a requirement if you're getting that winter tire discount.
Yeah, it's
so at least have them on.
It's so vague. Like I know some companies, they say November to April. And then again, like if you're actually in like the auto industry, they do say it's temperature regulated. So depending on how the temperatures are. So, but again, I would personally, if I were a client, I would just keep them on from November till April, basically, because then at that point, we shouldn't be seeing temperatures that are below that where you're going to need them. So I would say, just kind of rule of thumb, I would just basically say from November to April, have them on, but I would definitely start booking your vehicles in, because as the spring comes, obviously all these mechanic shops are going to start piling up. So you might see that there's going to be a lot of wait times if you want to start doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're always just in the spring, right? Everyone gets back out, gets excited for the outdoor weather again without having to wear jackets.
That's my favorite part. Don't jackets make everyone look like you're way bigger than you actually are? Like for me, like I wear I wear the vest all the time, and I'm like, man, do I actually look like this without the jacket on? But then you take the jacket off, and you're like, oh, okay, like there we go.
Yeah, it's nice. I prefer just to throw on that polo, for example, in the summer, and then just get into the car.
And then anywhere you go too, like for example, I was at the mall yesterday because I was returning my old phone. I got a new phone recently, and I had to return my other one. But like you go into like a mall, and like you have the sweater, like you have like your jacket on, and you're like, this is too hot. But then you go outside, and you're like, oh, I'm cold again, right? So there's like no like really like perfect balance. Because if you don't bring a jacket, you're freezing when getting into the mall. But then when you're in the mall, you're super hot, right? So
yeah, exactly.
There's no perfect medium for that. But another kind of just a tip, again, going into the spring and summertime. I always recommend, obviously, like throughout the winter too. This is not just a winter, spring and summer tip, but getting your car washed, because there's nothing worse than having salt and brine on your vehicle from all winter that could obviously eat away at your vehicle and cause rust and other kind of damage to your exterior of your vehicle. So big tip, definitely as the springtime is approaching, get your vehicle washed and get that salt and brine, if you're in rural areas, off your vehicle, because there's nothing worse than it sitting there. And again, it could just eat away at your vehicle all spring and summer. So get that off your vehicle as soon as possible.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things too about vehicles in the spring is that it's always nice to get outside yourself and do that too. Well, more of a summer thing, but was there anything else on the cars side, James, too, that we're forgetting?
Really just maintenance stuff. So obviously, especially if you're having a car just sit in your garage or sit at your property for 5-6 months during the wintertime, you obviously want to be making sure that you obviously are overlooking it before you are putting it on the road. So making sure you're checking very easy stuff. Making sure you're basically topping up fluids. I know a lot of people top up their windshield wiper fluid during the winter because a lot of people use it during that time with like the salt and like the debris on the road. But there's other things too, making sure you're checking your brakes, checking air filters and other filters in your vehicle, replacing your wiper blades. Because again, a lot of people, I use my wiper blades more in the wintertime because of the salt and the debris on the road than any time, I believe. So making sure that's up to date. I know there's a lot of companies out there that when you do your oil change now, they'll replace your wipers during this time because it's, again, you've used them all winter, and that's usually a lot when a lot of people use them. So yeah, checking that. Again, checking your battery. If your car is just sat there for 5 or 6 months, you want to make sure your battery is still healthy. You don't want to just go on the road and then it die on you, and then you have to like tow your vehicle and get that fixed. So again, before you're putting these vehicles back on the road, making sure you're checking stuff like that. And another big one that I don't know why it just really boils my blood, making sure you're checking your head and tail lights. There's nothing worse than going out onto the road and seeing someone that doesn't have a headlight, a tail light, a signal light, high beams, because they're burnt out. Because again, for a vehicle that you might have not have used for the last 5 or 6 months, it just sits there and things just break down. It's just how vehicles are. So you want to make sure that before you get on the road, you're checking stuff like that, even in your garage or wherever your vehicle might be, just tapping on all the signals, tapping your headlights, tapping your brakes, making sure all this stuff is working before you go out. Because the last thing you want is to go out on the road, not have this stuff working. And then again, a lot of these stuff actually with headlights, Mike, and brake lights, you could possibly get a ticket from cops if you actually don't have this stuff working. So to avoid that situation, just kind of doing your due diligence, just doing kind of like a annual maintenance check on your vehicle. It should be more than annually, but again, if you're putting these kind of vehicles back on the road, you want to make sure that you're putting them back on at the best possible condition, other than going on, your battery dying on you, you're towing your vehicle, your headlights out, you get a ticket, now your insurance is going up because you have a ticket for something that you could have just avoided before you actually drove that vehicle.
Right. And the one thing that actually came top of mind there while you were chatting was just in general vehicle breakdown. So most insurance policies, they're not really to be utilized as like an emergency roadside plan for like breakdowns. Obviously, insurance policies are more from a claim perspective. Some companies will give small little perks of like an emergency roadside coverage, but when you actually read into it, it is minor. You know, it's $25 for gas, or it's some kind of, just small frill or benefit that's built right in. It's really not a comprehensive emergency roadside plan. So if you need something like that, or you're to that person that, wants that, it's obviously a plug, but, CA Insurance has, a CA emergency roadside, right? Which is what I think a lot of older people and the average person, if you chat with, they've either heard of it or they've purchased it in the past, or a family member has it. That's what you want for like, door lock or longer tows for mechanical breakdown, stuff like that, James. But I think the thing I wanted to bring back to the insurance is that your insurance policy really isn't designed for that. So sometimes I've gotten questions like that in the past. I think that's a common misconception in some cases.
Yeah, I actually love that you brought that up, because there are a lot of companies other than CEA too that have started bringing out that sort of like emergency roadside coverage. But the biggest thing I kind of want to hit home on this is that your insurance does not cover you for maintenance issues. If you do not fix your vehicle, if you do not maintain your vehicle, the insurance companies are not paying out for maintenance issues. And I actually get that question a lot. I get oh, my car broke down because I don't know, let's say my engine is kind of died out. Will my insurance cover me? And I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like, if you don't maintenance your vehicle and your vehicle dies for whatever reason it might be, insurance is not paying for that. Insurance pays for claim related situations. They'll put your vehicle back to exactly how it was prior to a claim. Insurance is not meant, on both sides, home and auto, is not made for us to basically maintain your property as a car or a home. So that's a very, very important part I want to put out there, is that a lot of people still believe that we're a maintenance service, which we're not.
No, the biggest thing that insurance is for, and I learned this really early on in my career, it's for both sudden and accidental damage or loss, right? So it's for that time where somebody hits you or you hit somebody else. It's for, that water coming into your basement or that fire claim. And it's got to be sudden and accidental. I'll dive a little bit further into that on the home side with one or two coverages. But I think that's the big thing people need to realize, is that wear and tear on a vehicle is not something that's put through insurance if you have damage. So it doesn't fall under that. It never has. And
it never will.
That's not the idea behind the policy. So we can leave it like that.
Mike, let's move over to the home side now. Home side, again, I think there's a lot more to kind of talk about, because again, I think with kind of how homes are built, and obviously homes are probably one of the biggest investments you're going to make in your life. We want to make sure that people are making the right choices. And again, just making sure with the warmer weather coming, and just again, making sure things are done properly so that we can avoid claims in this situation.
Yeah, there is one monster area, especially from when this episode will be released and what will be, I guess, really current for the next 2 months on the home side, which is just overall water and, where it's going. Is it leaving? Is it going away from your home? What can be done? Some tips, all of those things. So the only thing I'll start off by saying that, you got to make sure that, for one, I would recommend your policy have, and we've mentioned this a few episodes before, but both the sewer backup and or overland water coverages. There's a couple of different water wordings for depending on which company you're with. But anyways, recommend talking with your broker or agent about water coverage and making sure your policy has it, and or what you can do as a prudent homeowner to make sure that you're not going to have water damage to your house, because these next 2 months are so big for snow belt. We got thawing ground with then spring runoff, rain, a bunch of different things, James, that are going to end up. This is the common time for the next couple of months for water problems to address at homes.
Yeah, you have all the snow that we recently got in southern Ontario and in lots of parts of Ontario. You have all this snow that's just sitting here waiting to melt with all the warmer weather that's coming. You have the rain that we have in springtime that's all going to basically melt the snow away. But the ground still it's not super frozen. We didn't have a crazy cold winter. So it's not like winters before where the ground was still super frozen and the water had nowhere to go. I think this year and years in the past where the ground's pretty thawed already, so at least the water has somewhere to go. But you want to be making sure that you are clearing any kind of gutters, eavesdrops, downspouts to make sure that these aren't clogged up with debris. I know a lot of people do this in the fall time with leaves and stuff, but you want to be making sure that you're doing it also in the springtime, because again, with the snow, especially if you're around trees, if your home has trees around it, with the snow falling off those trees, it can bring down other debris, like the bark on trees, like sticks, twigs, and stuff. And that all gets caught in eavesdrops and stuff. So you want to make sure those are all clear, because the last thing you want is to have it all dam up in your gutters and it's just flooding over the side. We see that all the time, Mike, that people will just have it flooding over the side. They're like, oh, it's going somewhere. It's not going into my house. But that's not what eavesdrops are meant for. They're meant to go in a fashionably order down into a certain area, not flood over the side, because then that just causes problems where the water is not being put to where it needs to be put, right? It needs to be moved away from the home, not around the home. So like I said, especially with all this melting and all the rain that we're going to get into the springtime, you want to make sure that the water is going to the proper areas, and that proper area is away from your home.
Yeah, I mean, there's two things on that, right? There's in the winter, what we commonly see for eaves troughs is ice damming, right? Where obviously water and or snow is frozen up, dammed part of your eaves trough, and then any other melting snow or ice, the water then has nowhere to go and it finds its way back into your house through the soffits and whatnot. That's always a pain in the butt, and there's not, unless you have other ways of clearing that, it does happen. But in the springtime too, it's going to be that similar thing, just with respect to other debris, if you haven't done it maybe in the fall. The second point of that is downspouts that are connected back to basically your weeping tile, which I know, if you drive down any regular residential road, you'll notice some houses have, put them away from the home, which is what you're supposed to do, 5 or 6 feet. But you'll see lots of homes that unfortunately still have them connected back into the weeping tile and then the sewer system. And what generally happens when we have these big dethaws and, spring runoff and heavy storms in the spring is when those sanitary sewer systems are basically filled and the water doesn't have anywhere to go, especially in like a massive dethaw or I guess a torrential downpour, for example. The system itself gets overwhelmed, and that's when you start seeing water come back up through floor drains in basements, right? And it's very, very common in the spring because you're going to get super, super moist ground. And the water keeps going down back into those storm sewer drains, and then it comes back up through floor drains. If you don't have a sump pump to help with that, or a backflow valve that comes down off your sewer line, there's a couple of different prevention methods. What ends up happening is you're that person that has water damage in your basement,
and that's the last thing you want.
Yeah,
it's not cheap to fix that kind of stuff.
Well, and water in general, water claims in general, and I know that's quite a few different types of water claims depending on how it enters your premises, but those types of losses are the number one loss payout for home insurance. It's not your It's not your traditional fire policy that it was a long time ago. I mean, those do happen and they're catastrophic and very unfortunate. But the more common thing that you hear about is someone that's had water damage in their basement from a couple of different ways.
And Mike, to kind of add to that point, they are by far the most claims on the homes, like by far. Like I know,
yeah.
Like in the last 10 years, like water claims have literally taken over like the home and property insurance industry for claims. Like that's literally what everyone is claiming against. Again, it kind of breaks down to, I know when we first kind of started the podcast, we did an episode on climate change, and that literally just relays right back to that episode where we've seen so much in our climate that has changed so much in the last 10, 15, even 20 years that, again, we might not have had the kind of weather we've had in the past, but now moving forward, we are having that, and we are experiencing a little bit more different weather patterns. So you are seeing a lot more people are claiming against water. And even now, you know what?
Yeah.
Wind is becoming a big thing too. All the windstorms we've had in the last, even like 3 years, like think of all the windstorms, like how like windy our climate's been recently. Like there's been so many wind claims as well.
Yeah. Wind's been a monster thing. I would be seeing a lot more damage as a result of that. But to just quickly mention too, the one other thing that I wanted to quickly highlight, because a lot of people maybe want to submit this thing through insurance, this type of claim. But to go back to our maintenance thing, if you have like let's say a foundation crack problem, which might be just the foundation settling, it's very common in basements. But you finished your basement, which again is more common. I think now a lot of people have finished basements as extra space. If you have a foundation crack and it's causing, prolonged water damage behind your insulation or drywall and whatnot, and you don't necessarily know about it, that's usually not going to be covered through an insurance policy or by that company, because it is that long, prolonged water damage, James. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over, possibly months or even years in some cases.
Yeah, most insurance companies do not touch anything when it comes to foundational cracks or anything like that.
There is some, like if you have, if there is a way to say that it was somehow in like an accidental and sudden water loss, and it ends up coming through a crack, and you now see damage, but there's no mildew, mold, or signs of like prolonged damage, you might have an argument. And there's a couple that have like below grade or kind of below ground water coverages included in their policy wordings.
It's not everyone gray area. It's a very gray area, so to speak.
But that's the big thing I wanted to say was just, it's got to be sudden and accidental. If it's a prolonged water damage thing, and you can see like, even just the framing, for example, is completely rotted out, that didn't happen overnight. So you're probably looking at that, paying for it yourself, or, paying for it out of pocket. You're not going to be using insurance for that.
Moving kind of above the foundation, two things I really want to hit home here. Obviously, when you are checking your gutters and stuff, maybe just give a check to your roof as well, shingles, and your chimney. Because again, with all that snow that we've had sitting on your roof and melting, you want to make sure that there's been no damage to your chimney, there's been no damage to your roof or shingles, because the last thing you want is to get into the springtime where if there is damage to either one, all the rain that's coming down or all the melting that we're going to be having in the next few months, it's just basically a way for the water to now seep into your roof and cause a bunch of damage to your home that way. Again, a massive, massive claim that you obviously don't want to have. So again, when you're up there, if you're cleaning out your gutters or just inspecting kind of your roof, make sure you are inspecting for areas that you might see a little bit of damage. And again, checking your chimney, because the last thing you want is, oh, you know what, I'm going to use my fireplace or whatever it might be. And again, the snow or the ice has kind of shifted your chimney or kind of damaged it a bit. And again, causing a chimney fire or causing an actual structure fire because the chimney was damaged and it wasn't ventilating the actual fireplace properly. So if you're up there on your roof, just making sure you're checking those things quickly and you're not seeing any damage before we get into these months where, again, a lot of melting, a lot of rain coming down. And again, the last thing you want is have rain seeping through your roof and causing massive damage in your home.
One of the reasons why there is roof updates, right, is that for that exact reason, shingles in Canada don't necessarily last as long as what a manufacturer says. And that's not a dig at the roofing industry. It's just the reality of weather we have here and the fact that depending on both sun damage and exposure and other elements, you don't typically get 50 years out of a roof as much as some manufacturers might say that shingle is going to last that long. I would argue and say that the average person, and this is more for insurance basis and what I've seen and heard, I would say the average person does it anywhere between about 12 to 20 years. James, is what I would say.
Yeah, I was going to say 15 to 20 years. You're probably replacing a roof because again, it's kind of like in Canada it's a very double-edged sword. Yes, we have really good weather for all the people that love winter, and if you do, I'm sorry that you love winter because I can't stand it, but then you have the other side where we have really good summer weather. But the double-edged sword side to this is that with these very contrasting weather patterns that we have, you get the harsh winters that, again, all the snow, all the ice that hit your roof and hit your property is obviously going to cause damage. But then on the other side, you have these really great summer climate that, again, but we have these times where like it can hit up to 40 degrees in some parts of Canada, and that sun just beating down on your roof is obviously causing damage to the roof. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You want to make sure that with our climate, and like Mike was saying, it's not a dig at the roofing industry. It's just unfortunate we have literally the best and the worst of both worlds, where it's causing damage in basically all seasons. So you want to make sure that you are checking that kind of stuff before it's too late. And I know a lot of people have, it's been big recently, Mike, a lot of people moving into the metal roofs.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate of them. I don't see a lot of downsides aside from the fact that from a cost perspective, the average person chooses not to or can't afford a metal roof. That's
what?
The
they're actually not that much more than what a shingle roof is. So if you're really thinking about like staying, like if you're at a home and you're like, this is my forever home, I would definitely, as a client, I would look into like a metal roof before shingles, because again, I know you're short term, you're looking probably a few extra $1,000 to do metal, but long term, you're probably not going to have to ever replace that roof in your lifetime. So, and like I said, realistically, I've seen some companies and like that do it. The metal roofs are not that much more expensive to do, and they last a lot longer.
Yeah, I can't comment on price. I was always under the assumption that they were quite a bit more, to the point where like the average person, it's like double as much, if not more than that. It
depends on obviously what like what materials you're using, but I think recently they've kind of made it more affordable for people. And like I said, if I were you, if I was a client looking to redo my roof, I would definitely look into the metal roof side, because again, yeah, short term you're going to be paying more, but long term, you probably will never have to replace that roof in your lifetime if you are going to do a metal roof. So just kind of
interesting
thought.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for people to know for sure.
Kind of moving into the last part of the episode here, just a lot of kind of like maintenance tips. I think, Mike, I think the biggest one really not pertain towards insurance, but checking that AC, because the last thing you want to do is get into the May, June, July months, turn on that AC the first time, and it doesn't work. That is such a bummer, Mike.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's a general thing, but a lot of people, I think, wait until it's too late. I understand why as well, but man, there is nothing worse than like a cooking summer day when you got a couple of different fans just running around your house trying to cool down.
Yeah, so just again, before it really hits summertime, you want to make sure you are checking the AC. And even if you want to go towards like the heating time in the fall time, you want to make sure you're doing this prior, because like I said, it more pertains to insurance when it comes to actually heating, because the last thing you want is pipes freeze up, they burst, you now have a massive water claim. In the winter or in the summertime, springtime, heat's really not going to do much inside a home other than obviously make it very unbearable to live in it. So if you do have AC, I know a lot of people don't, like, everyone doesn't have AC. So if you don't, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you do, you want to make sure that it is working, because the last thing you want is to turn it on and be like, oh, it doesn't work. And then you have to, again, replace it before it's too late before the big months of July and August come, where it's just scorching outside and you want to just be at least comfortable. The worst, man, Mike, the worst thing is, you know what I find? It's not even like during the day. It's at night when you're in your bed and it's just so hot and you're just like, man, I feel like I'm in an ocean right now.
It needs to be temperature controlled for sure.
Yes.
The one thing I'll actually mention, because I know a lot of people always ask and they'll give more info than they have to, is there's 4 big updates that obviously we ask for on home insurance and the companies really want to know about. Your AC is not one of those. So it's typically heating. So you're talking, your boiler, your furnace, talking about the age there, your electrical, your roof, and your plumbing. We typically in the business do not care about your AC. Most companies don't even have a question for that on it. And sometimes a hot water tank as well is great to know. But yeah, AC is not one of them. So when you're talking about telling, what's important, what's not, I would suggest that the AC is as much as it's great if you update it and it's good to tell, it usually doesn't matter too much.
Exactly. Yep. Moving into another kind of big one too is your outside faucets. So again, in Canada, most of people that own homes, or if they have outside faucets, they'll turn them off during the winter, because again, you're not using them, and they obviously will freeze up. So you want to make sure before you turn them on, there is obviously no damage to the piping. There's no backup of ice or damming up of debris that's inside the faucet, because the last thing you want is to turn it on, go to use your hose, and there's a massive like backup in it, and it could explode the whole pipe or cause a massive flood outside. That again, basically, if it's broken outside and you can't turn it off, then all it's doing is basically just flooding the outside too. So again, just I know a lot of people that do landscaping and stuff, and they like to kind of garden and kind of putter around the outside of their home. If you are going to be using your outside faucets, especially now when it's going to basically be melting and unthawing, just kind of doing a little quick review of, is the pipe damaged? Is there any kind of backing up of ice that's not melting through there before you actually go and turn on your hose and actually use it for the first time during the year.
Right. Yeah, big tip for the fall. Obviously, a little bit of what you need to know for the spring as well.
Yeah. Other than that, obviously there's probably 1,000 other tips we can give, but I think those are really the ones that pertain more to insurance. Is there anything else you kind of want to add, Mike, before we kind of wrap things up here?
No, I mean, the only thing that I'll mention too is not this, it's still too early, obviously, but people are going to start thinking about getting maybe their trailers, the seasonal trailers unwrapped or put back out to certain areas, or boats or whatever they end up using for the summer there. But again, just making sure you have the right coverage, talking to your broker or agent, who you use, to ensure that the actual amount you have on those rec vehicles, so like ATVs, for example, boats, recreational trailers, the value of what they're insured for is A, what you would like to see back, and or B, is kind of current to market value. So it's not underinsured in a sense, especially considering that claims can and unfortunately do happen. So even wrecked vehicles need to be looked at, and more pleasure craft things need to be looked at the same way as our car and home. But it's just more of a small plug. And for those interested, obviously we can do all of those. Just in case any viewers were not aware, we do boats, jet skis, ATVs, sleds, kind of everything in that realm.
Yeah, you want to be making sure that if you have this stuff put away for the winter time, that you're not just pulling it out and there's no damage to it, right? Again, it's sitting there for 5, 6, even 7 months. Like, you want to make sure you're not pulling it out and there's a massive hole in it, or like animals got in, for example. Obviously, animals want to live in a warmer weather, not outside. So I know that was a common thing when we had boats and stuff too, is that during the winter time, we'd always see that animals would be trying to get into the boats or trailers that we had, because again, they don't want to obviously be outside during this colder weather. So just making sure that you're checking before you're putting it back on the road. Again, you don't want to hook it up to your truck or vehicle or whatever it might be, get to your campsite and then open your trailer up and there's 14 raccoons in there and you're like, oh, that's great. So just obviously doing your due diligence before it's back on, you're using it, to make sure, one, there's no damage and it can actually be used the way you want to be used, and two, you have the right coverage on there. Because like I said, I know it's getting to that time of year where it's getting super exciting. You've looked at that car, you've looked at that bike, you looked at that ATV for the last 6 months. You're like, man, I just want to get back on this and use this. But making sure it's able to actually be driven on the road or on the trails, because the last thing you want is to get them out, use them, get pulled over, or have an accident happen, and then find out, oh my God, I never put coverage back on this. And basically, you're not going to have there's basically going to be no coverage if that happens.
Yeah, bikes too. As a friendly reminder, if you still have a policy that maybe you remove the bike completely, like a motorcycle, or you take it off the road, or if I know there might be some that are still like that, make sure you contact your representative and add that liability coverage back onto it. There's going to become nice days, and if your policy is not on already a 12-month kind of active one where you're paying for 12 equal months now, which is very common, I would hate to see people, not know that they don't have their motorcycle insured and go for that nice day in April, for example.
Yeah, literally the last thing you possibly want to happen to you.
I know a lot of companies went away from that, where they basically do 12-month policies now, and the majority of the premium is earned during those 6 to 7 months. So even though you're making 12 equal payments for the year, like your car and home insurance, canceling it almost has no benefit now to you as a client, because the majority of what the earned premium is from April, May until October. So even if you cancel that bike policy in November, you're not really getting back any money because it's earned to the insurance company. So
there really isn't any benefit, because actually insurance companies will look at it and be like, okay, you're canceling it every single year. And you could there's some insurance companies that will actually mark you down as not having continuous insurance on a recreational vehicle. So there really is no benefit to doing that. There's actually a con to doing that because, like I said, some insurance companies will say, well, you didn't have continuous insurance on this bike. We can't give you insurance saying that you've been insured for the last 20 years because you've taken it off the road every single year. So technically you are a new driver now.
Or, I mean, at very least, you're going to have that kind of gap in it. So it's not going to be that continuous insurance. So you'll probably still get a price, but it may be higher than what you're eligible for by continuing to pay. So it fluctuates. The bike market in particular, not to go too far into detail, but the bike market's always been more volatile as companies try to determine, what's profitable to them and what the right rate is for a rider, because every different bike has associated losses and certain riders are better than others and kind of all that stuff, James, that goes along with it. But I know for a fact that, out of the, 5 or 6 competitive bike markets that we have and work with, a couple of those like now to see continuous insurance. So, I mean, it benefits you to continually insure your bike even through the winter, because if underwriting changes from an insurance company in 5 years and they say, okay, now we want to see this continuous from all companies, it benefits you as a client because now you're getting better prices from more companies. So if you're ever doing that kind of shop process or we're doing it for you, you're going to get more options than just that one that looks at, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Very, very true. There's no benefit for you to be canceling this kind of stuff. So, but yeah, kind of wrapping up. Next week, we actually do have Alex on the show from Tried and True Mortgages. He'll be on. And again, actually today recording, the Bank of Canada will be announcing either if they're going to be increasing rates again on mortgages or they're going to be keeping them the same moving forward. So there'll be a lot of talking points I know that Alex wants to bring to the episode. So I am very excited for next week.
Yeah, that should be exciting. We got, personally, and I know just talking with friends and family and coworkers and whatnot, everyone wants to kind of get an idea about mortgage rates in general and everything else. So that'll be a great episode to kind of get his thoughts on what he sees every day.
Exactly. So look out for next week's episode. But again, we always want to thank you guys for tuning in this week, and we'll check you guys next week.